Hey, it's me, Rob Ryan. And I know I tell you every week in one of these preview clips that I had an amazing conversation or an incredible conversation or a beautiful conversation. And it's honestly not disingenuous promotion. I genuinely, deeply, humanly enjoy the conversations that I get to have with these incredible, bright, empathetic, talented, hardworking leaders, entrepreneurial thinkers across the country and the world when we talk about the world that we exist in, but from an entrepreneurial thinker's point of view, right? And the conversation that I had this week that I want to share with you with Allison Byers, the CEO and founder of a platform company called Scroobius, and her insights into the world of venture capital and frankly, just capital. So if you're a founder listening to the show and you wonder, how can I find the sources of outside capital, outside money that I need to try and help execute my business or try and help grow my business or try and help fuel my dreams? The conversation that we have with Allison is going to be so instructive and so specifically informative to you about which direction to go, what resources are available to you, why some of the commonly accepted narrative of like, oh, you have to go get venture capital and you have to get it from these types of firms and these types of places is not necessarily true, nor is it necessarily the best advice or guidance for you on your journey as an entrepreneur. If you're an investor, you're going to want to listen to this because you're going to want to better understand like the myriad of ways that you can deploy capital to support the growth of not just individual entrepreneurs, but through individual entrepreneurs who build their businesses, the growth of healthy economies, the growth of healthy ecosystems, the growth of national economies or state or local or city economies, because that's what business has actually always been about. Business isn't just about the financialization of private capital and its returns on asset value. Business is about people building solutions to problems that exist in their local communities, then employ other people to help deliver those to other people who are consumers who then spend their money with those. And then businesses buy from businesses and governments buy from businesses. And we wind up with healthy economies and a healthier version of capitalism. And we desperately need that. So this conversation with Allison Byers, who is an expert in these topics, who has literally helped draw up legislation that is redrawing how we share information about venture capital investments and private capital investments in the United States, is an incredible conversation that I'm super grateful, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as she and I did making it for you.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. As you know, or maybe you don't know because you're joining us for the first time, this is the show where I get to have weekly conversations with the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry as we come together to hopefully try to leave this world a little bit better than we found it this morning. Today, I'm super grateful to be joined by Allison Byers, the founder of Scroobius. And let me tell you a little bit about Allison before we get a chance to meet her. She is, in my humble opinion, what I call a fire starter in the world of private capital, equity, and access. And honestly, if we're in a world that's on fire in so many ways, both literally and figuratively, saying that from here in Los Angeles, as they'd say in good forest management practices, sometimes you need a good fire starter to start the controlled burn today so that the future wildfires aren't worse, right? Allison Byers is the CEO of Scroobius, a board director of the nonprofit GK Fund, a leader in Boston's all-raised women's investment community, and a proud graduate of both Syracuse and Boston University. Go BU. She's someone who's not just disrupting the system, but frankly, rebuilding it from the ground up to create greater access to capital resources and the support that a wider range of today's entrepreneurs really need to be successful in creating economic opportunity for the rest of us. She's a founder, a mom, angel investor, and a national leader in creating regulatory policy, which we're going to talk a lot about today, and people-forward programming. And quite honestly, to me, she's a one-woman movement sometimes who doesn't just talk about changing the systems, but essentially has dedicated her life now to building the platform to literally offer different pathways forward. From writing laws to rewriting the rules of who gets funded. Allison is here. She's got great stories that we're going to share today, strategies, and some real truthful as I like to call them, truth bombs occasionally. So Allison Byers, my friend, welcome to the show.
Amazing. Thank you for having me. I want you to introduce me everywhere I go.
If I could figure out how to create a product out of that or a service, like I'm luckiest man in the world, because our guests, who now, by the way, once the show is finished, you become an alumni of our community. We don't call you a guest because that's too transactional. You become an alumni, like you are part of our family. And our guests regularly tell me that. I take that as a great compliment. And so I'm like, I've got to figure out a way that I could literally travel around the country, just introduce these people at their meetings or at their events. I'm just like the hype man. Just hire me out as your hype man.
Yeah, I want you, I'm going to put that as my voicemail recording.
Right. There you go. I'm sure your son's friends will love that. Right. Okay. So we've got a lot to unpack and talk about today. And it's a serious topic. We're bringing great energy to it, but it's a serious topic. It's a problem, right? But in that it's a problem, it's also an opportunity. And so I want to kind of open it up, big picture, wide open, question to just get us started. I've had this conversation a lot. And so I'm having this conversation with you because you bring a very specific, unique perspective and set of experiences to it. And so I'm going to ask you kind of the question that I eventually get to ask, with a lot of people around this issue, which is like, is the answer that we just carve out an invitation to the table, or is the answer that we really just need to build a bunch of different tables?
So it's an interesting question. And honestly, it comes down to your definition of what is the table that you're metaphorically talking about. Because there's a lot of different ways to think about what we're essentially discussing is how do you fund innovation, right? And when we talk about the table, we think about like the negotiating table. So who's right? Like the investors in innovation are on one side and the founders are on the other side. Metaphorically, that's how a lot of people think of it, right? Or that you're in the room and you get a seat at the table to discuss how we're going to do all these things.
Right.
Lots of different metaphors. But really what, for me, when I look at the landscape, and I know we're going to dive in deeper, but we tend to be very self-limiting in the way that we talk about the table or the capital. And it doesn't even have to just be about investment. And when we do talk about investment, we're usually talking about venture capital, and that's the data we're going to dive into and that everyone hears about. But even venture capital is a small portion of the capital we should think about when it comes to funding innovation or things that advance our society and our well-being. And it's only an 80-year-old industry, Rob.
Thank you.
Venture capital has not been around for all that long, and we can get into how it started, how it has evolved, and why we find ourselves in the place we are. But I encourage everyone to think bigger than a table. And the table is certainly not just venture. And so we talk about having a seat or creating other tables. I think it's a limiting view of speaking about innovation and funding.
I love that. There's literally no better guest on any show that I ever do than one who really thoughtfully essentially undermines and challenges the premise of the question that I asked in the first question, because that tells me that that's how we should be thinking better, right? Immediately you're being an entrepreneurial thinker. You're not just accepting the base premise of the question. You're instead diving in and going like, respectfully, I think, let me use your metaphor as an example for us to better frame up how we should all be functioning. And that leads to my next thought, which is like, that's one of the reasons that I was so drawn to you in particular, right? We've had an online history of a relationship. We have literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of great people in common. And we play on the edges of this world, or work on the edges of this work now in different ways, but still with an attention to it. And so what to me you bring that differentiates you from lots of other folks I've had this conversation with is that you're not just talking about it, as I said in your bio, right? You're working at it. Like, you're building new systems to create these pathways. You're helping write better laws. So do me a favor, talk to me about why your work is so important, but not just to you. Talk to me about why the work that you're doing is so important to healthy economic growth for the country.
Yeah. No, I love this question. And it is something that all those wonderful people we have in common, I talk to so many of them about this as well, is the vast majority of our population doesn't understand how the funding for entrepreneurs, who are the innovation engine, impacts everyone. And when that resource, that money that drives the ability to innovate and form new companies is inequitably distributed to the degree that it is today, it is an everyone problem. It's not just a problem for the founders. It's not just a problem for the wealthy or the elite. It's everyone. It's how you live your life. Right? So today, just to set the scene, right? In the first half of 2025, $163 billion were invested in startups. This is the inequitable piece of it. 65% of those dollars went to California, were invested in California. And this is venture capital dollars specifically, right? Because this is the data that's really available to us to look at as the engine. Of that $163 billion, 0.8% of it went to all women founding teams. Less than 1%. 52% of it went to all male founding teams. And I think it's really important to look at those two specifically against each other, and not just the mixed team element of it, which is important. But one gender is getting more than half alone, and the other gender is getting less than 1%. And so when we talk about an imbalance, that the critical resource of funding is one of the most inequitably distributed resources I can think of, that I know of. And I've done this research. I honestly have trouble finding another thing that is that inequitable.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? We're only getting innovations that are developed by a single or small demographic, a very homogenous demographic, who are not in the markets that everyone else is and don't understand the need for them. We see that result in women's healthcare. Women's healthcare gets 1% of funding. Women get 1% of funding.
I mean,
right?
like healthcare solutions for 50.2% of the population, right?
Yeah,
Gets
right?
only 1% of the funding available. So like
Exactly.
inevitably, then don't we wind up in a world that has women being delivered inadequate healthcare outcomes, healthcare services, healthcare tools, medical things that are literally like built for the male body, the male biology, and then just like with a pink or light blue cover like slapped on it, sold to women.
Exactly.
And then somewhere, and we won't be able to extrapolate this far out the data, but like somewhere then, like, this is going to be me being dramatic for podcast effect, like some woman passes, some woman dies, like some woman isn't able to solve a disease that she has. Some woman suffers a less vibrant, healthy life because like it all ties back together, like this wild inequity of resources and resource distribution. When you even strip out or venture capital, strip out capital, just this wildly inequitable like distribution of resources that are necessary to create innovation. Wow.
And that's why it's an everybody problem. Everybody, not just the woman herself, everyone around that woman who cares for that woman, who knows that woman, is impacted by the inability to receive care that you need. But you can't, even prescription medicine or any medicine dosage is based on the male biology. We're just taking it. We don't have another option. Yeah. And it leads to so many things. But then even apart from solutions that are built for one demographic, whether it's gender or race or geography or whatever you want to pick, we're also innovating for everyone. Those demographics lead to better solutions for climate, for financial instruments, for food, for consumer goods, you name it. It doesn't only impact the demographic of the innovator. And so we're sacrificing estimates from Morgan's. There's so many different institutions have estimated what are we sacrificing economically, because you asked that question as well, by having this funding gap. Morgan Stanley estimates that it's $4 trillion in untapped GDP, just because of the funding gap. It's
goodness.
an enormous amount. Another study by McKinsey found that advancing women's equality could add 12 trillion to the global GDP. We're talking about astronomical numbers that we all suffer because we are limiting this critical resource of capital from more than half of the population.
My goodness. I mean, I've long, I'm an ally, I'm an advocate of the cause in this particular cause's case, or in other related causes of inequities. But just on the emotional, moral level, right? But even setting that aside, I have for years kind of tried to underline my moral positioning with this argument, with this hey, wait a minute, isn't this fundamentally just bad business?
Yes,
isn't this fundamentally just not only bad business on the local micro level, the individual relationship between investors and their fund thesis, but isn't it bad economic development growth business on the national / geopolitical global level?
It is. And, Rob, what's so interesting about this human created problem is that from a business perspective, or take any financial advisor, every financial advisor says to diversify where your money is because it is a smarter money decision, which is true. This is proven out, right? And for some reason, diversifying your portfolio is not considered divisive, right? Like the diversity of your investments or your money. No one's going to argue about the word diversity in there. But then when you apply that basic principle that a diverse set of things leads to better results to other areas, it falls apart for some people. And it becomes this divisive term when it's just a basic principle of how things operate, that when you have diversity, you have better results. And of course, that is the same for teams developing things, for people creating innovations, for managing companies. It is a principle that somehow has not translated and doesn't register with those who are in positions of power to control that diversification.
Yeah, both fascinating and maddening at the same time.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at eSudo. Running any business, but especially a law firm, means balancing a lot. And technology, frankly, shouldn't be a headache. eSudo makes information technology and cybersecurity simple for law firms large or small. With over 20 years of experience, they specialize in everything from Microsoft 365 management to advanced cybersecurity solutions. They help you to stay ahead of threats, manage your data securely, and keep your tech running smoothly so that you can focus on what matters most, your clients. eSudo understands the legal industry's unique needs, offering tailored solutions to ensure that your firm is always in compliance and always protected. Are you ready to upgrade your firm's technology or get help with your questions? Visit esudo.com.
I humbly think, I've postulated this over the last handful of years in particular, that I think one of the reasons that this problem that you've so articulately described for us is so persistent, is that many times the folks that are trying to attack it, to make it better, right, to mitigate its effects, are only looking at it from their point of view, natural human instinct, maybe sometimes business instinct, bad business instinct, but a natural human instinct, right? They're motivated by their own self-interest. They're a venture capitalist, or they're an entrepreneur, or they're a legislature, right? And they're just looking at, I'm curious, and this is sometimes hard to self-describe, self-analyze, like I'm about to ask you to do for yourself. But I'm curious, what is it about your story, your particular lived experience, as they say, that has allowed you to appreciate this intersection between private sector interests and public policy regulatory stuff and this complex, nuanced problem? What has allowed you to see it so clearly as you do without seemingly just diving down just one rabbit hole of your like, well, I'm an angel investor, or I'm this, or I'm that. Like, what is it about you that brought you to this place where you can so clearly articulate what the rest of us seem to struggle to understand?
Well, without self-aggrandizing, but based on my
I
own,
told you that this is the hard part.
I mean, I'll try to keep it at a fairly high level, but my intense interest from a young age has been in human psychology, and I've had an extremely nonlinear career, some by choice, some not by choice, but I've always focused on how do I understand data through the lens of how it makes people act, or how people's human psychology impacts the behavior and therefore shows up in the data, one or the other. And so my previous experience before founding Scroobius, kind of my origin story for Scroobius, was my first time in the world of entrepreneurship, that outside of being an operator or being a consultant. And I joined scientific co-founders. We launched a medical device company out of MIT. It was based on an existing 10 years worth of data and clinical work. And it was a really incredible, or it is, still exists, incredible med tech device. And I was the business one responsible for doing all the businessy things, incorporating the company and our fundraising. And we raised about 10 million for that company over the course of 5 years. I did not know any of the things I know now. I was not in startup land even. I was just doing what I do and brute forcing my way and building this company, and just happened to be naturally good at pitching and fundraising. And, we had the network, and I recognized my own privilege as well. All the things that one would expect to have to succeed in this space. And we hit a wall raising our Series B. So it was a really, really challenging time. And we can go down this path as deep as you want to or not, but experienced, the things that I hear from quite literally thousands of founders today about true physical burnout, doing this while having 2 little kids, just the extreme nature of trying to get the money to continue to build a company that had every positive signal from the market that you should and could have at that point. And we ended up selling the company in what's called an asset sale, which not a lot of people talk about, but is a very frequent occurrence for quote unquote exited founders, where you don't benefit financially, you don't profit. I lost money. I had invested in that company. I invested in myself. And learned after that the acquiring company, which happened to have an all-male leadership team, went on to raise $55 million.
Because they had some magic secret sauce that they didn't tell you about during the acquisition, or because they were all men?
Because they had the ability to pick up the phone and call their network and match the signals that apparently I couldn't match, and our female leadership team could not match. So, I'm not, it's not assigning anything other than, well, that was a data point for me. When I learned that happened, it was fairly traumatic, if I'm being honest, and I'm pretty open about this. But
former entrepreneurial asset seller right here, so totally with you on that one.
Well, it's traumatic to learn that happened, because the very first thing you do is internalize the failure, which is what I did. Right? I said, "Oh my God, how could I not have done that? How did I fail? And that is when I looked into the data, because I'm a data person and a researcher. I didn't know the statistics about where this funding goes. And I pitched every household name VC you can think. We were in their offices, right? Like, I pitched my heart out across the country. And it told me, when I learned about that data, and by the way, where I live in Massachusetts, while we are the 3rd highest allocator of venture capital, we are one of the worst in the country for getting that to women, at 0.6%. And so I learned it. And while devastating and all the things and rage and everything you feel, I had the light bulb moment that not enough founders get to have, which is, oh, I didn't fail. I just did not know that I was operating in a system that was designed to keep me marginalized.
Yeah.
I was statistically unlikely to raise what I was looking for, and I just didn't know it.
Right.
And
There's
so for me,
no venture capitalists are hanging that on their website, right? Oh, by the way, as you sign up on our website, just to let you know, here's the likelihood of how this is going to play out, right?
no, who's going to do that? And that data, this will lead into the policy work when we get there, but that data is not easy to get. It's not available. It's not comprehensive. Even the data that I cite comes from private industry and it's not comprehensive. And so when, your question, what allows me to see things like that is I had an experience that very clearly laid out for me in numbers what is wrong with a system. And because I am by nature a systems thinker, I sat back and I'm again privileged to have been able to do a year of research in this in between, before I decided to found Scroobius and do all the other things I do now, to really understand the industry of venture capital and how did we get here and why does it work this way, and interviewed hundreds of people, founders and investors, to understand how do we do it different then? Because when something is that imbalanced, you can't fix it. My focus isn't on fixing venture capital. It's too imbalanced for me. So how do we build something different? And that's what allowed me to see it as both my path, my professional path and learning path and natural interest, but also that critical experience and the step of learning about what happened afterward.
Such a fascinating part of what you described there is this juxtaposition, as I'm hearing it, right? Of having to experience and or having had the opportunity to experience, as you say, both the raw, like humanly devastating emotion, that punch in the face type of feeling, right? But then to be able to essentially juxtapose that against these are my words, like what I'll say is like that dispassionate data nerd systems thinking analyst brain of yours that then is able to say like, okay, like the emotion is over here. I've lived it. I felt it. I understand it. Like it nearly killed me, but it didn't. Right. And now wait a minute. Like I woke up one day past that, like not past it completely, but like it was a smaller portion of your reality. Right. And then the data nerd analyst systems thinker brain starts taking over. Right. And then you're obsessed with this problem. Right. You're obsessed with the fact that, again, not a solution, not a quick fix, not a like, how do I make this better for me next time? But like you're obsessed with the fact that this thing, that like this problem, which is basically like a bad miswriting of the rules of the game that like never gets published, right? Like you're like, why does this even exist? And that,
Yeah.
like that's such a beautiful book, but also like very instructive answer to the rest of us, the rest of the people that are playing in this industry, that are working at these spaces, to start to try and map out like how they can break the cycles of just being like enraged by it, right? And then like kind of just go back to being like, well, I'll be enraged by it, but I'm still in it, and I have to figure out a way to raise my fund to do my thing, to make my living, to like, so I'm not really going to change it. I'm just going to be enraged by it while I'm in it, right? And that's totally normal. Like I'm not besmirching those people, but thank you. I mean, that's a wonderful, like a wow, insightful answer that I honestly didn't even expect in asking that question. So that's amazing. You referenced something, and we're going to dive in and out a little bit here. But so come with us on this journey, people. But like you referenced legislation in this part of your analysis and how you started to think about it afterwards, and kind of you understood that was a potential component, right? And you highlight maybe one of the places where that component could exist in differences in state lines, right? Like, so Massachusetts, California, et cetera, et cetera. So you very notably, famously in this community, this world, right, we're deeply involved in the crafting of some legislation here in my home state in California. If I did my research properly, it was called SB 54, Senate Bill 54, went into effect in March of 2025. Talk to us, and we'll get back to the analytical, philosophical parts of it, but like frame it up for us. Like, what does it do? Why is it so important? Not just for us in California, but for the broader venture capital industry, right? As we go forward, because there's that old saying from like the 1930s, like as California goes, so goes the nation. And I always like to remind people that doesn't always mean like only great stuff, Like that means that like all the bad stuff that happens in the society of the American culture eventually happens here, and usually happens here first because we're such a big bellwether, right? We literally are the largest populated state with the largest economy. We create the largest percentage of the national GDP. So literally, like, and I use the classic example that's on everybody's minds in present day tense. Like, if homelessness or having an unhoused population is going to be a problem in the United States, it's going to have first been a problem in California, right? So like if it's here, it's going to be there, right? And so in some ways, you came to kind of the frontier, right? To help craft some legislation that then will, ideally, I assume, spread its influence across the country. So talk to us about SB 54. Frame it up in any way you'd like to educate us.
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying, part of why I'm so vocal about all the things I do is also to show other people that you can have agency and do things. I have only been doing any of this for 5 years, right? Like I was not in startup. I was not an advocate. I was not doing any of this stuff. I had no idea I could get involved in policy or politics at all or any of this. So like, I'm not a special, like anyone can do this. But you have
you are special, but in a different way. Like the point we're all making that both of you and I are trying to amplify is like, people listen to this. Like, listen, she's just lit a pathway that any of us can jump on and follow.
Yeah, a lot of people that I've met over these past 5 years are drawn to me or drawn to what I'm doing, or, it's just like, I'm like anybody else. I don't know. But you have to act, right? So I get invited to take part in these amazing initiatives of change because I'm vocal, because I, am consistent and loud and all of that. And again, Rob, like one of the things I always am very clear to point out is I recognize I can do a lot of this because of privilege as well. I can be loud because I am privileged, right? And so it comes from 100%. That place. And not everyone will feel comfortable or have the ability or the privilege to be as loud as I am, which is part of what makes me want to do it even more. But with SB 54, it was just a perfect combination of circumstances that came because I'd for a few years already been beating this drum and doing the work and out there consistently, talking about my passion for making change in this area and bringing the data to it. And I've been quite vocal about that data aspect as well. You pointed out rightly that I am very nerdy and really love research and data and all of that and geek out about it. But, all of these numbers we cite, the primary resource is PitchBook, which is a private company. And it is not comprehensive data. And when you look at the legislation and regulations around where does capital go, how did we get to this place? None of it regulates venture capital. Like there's carve outs for venture capital in other places of reporting. And where we have regulations for companies or anything that takes public resources or public money, right? They're regulated because the people want to make sure that it's being allocated in an appropriate way. Venture does tap into public money. They take pension money and endowments, right? Their LPs are from public institutions and people who don't even realize that some of the money they contribute is in a venture fund.
100%.
Why is there no oversight and no regulation on that, even to the degree of just reporting? And so that's where we started, because of who I am and what I do. I got invited into this very small team strategically in California for the reasons that you stated. California is the leader here, both in terms of where the money is and its ability to act and have an influence because of how large it is and how big a role it plays in innovation. And I co-authored it. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. I wrote,
it's amazing. I mean, I'm I'm your hype man. So I'm just going to heap praise on you. Like, it's amazing. I mean, it's incredible. So like, just the context of how you got to there is fascinating. Because again, like, this isn't about, I'll say it again so that you don't have to keep saying it, feeling like you have to be so humble. Like, you are who you are, and everybody knows you're humble, and everybody knows that you are deeply grateful for the opportunities. And of course, we come from positions of privilege relative to our own lives, like, and relative to the rest of the world. But having said that, it is still freaking amazing, right? That you just as the boys club would say, like, every man, like, you just the average everyday woman, right? In America, like, found her way because of the advocacy you did on a public basis, found her way into a room full of people who shared your beliefs and shared what was an interest in crafting some bulwark of regulatory participation in an industry that is supposedly so critically important to our overall growth of our overall economy, where there was none, and you guys got it done. So do me a favor, tell us specifically, like, what literally is SB 54, and then, like, what exactly does it mandate or regulate or
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Plain Text Capital. You know, investing in Web3 and cryptocurrencies isn't about jumping on the latest trends. It's about understanding where the market is headed and why. Plain Text Capital is a digital asset investment firm focused on long-term strategies backed by deep research, backing the best Web3 companies and protocols, and investing in the newest asset classes of the future. They believe that Web3 crypto will drive digital innovation for decades to come, creating significant value for investors. In fact, their team of highly skilled professionals work with institutions and serious individual investors who want clarity in a space full of hype and noise. So if you're looking to cut through the chaos and invest with purpose, Plain Text Capital brings a disciplined, high-conviction approach to investing. You can learn more and meet the team at plaintextcapital.com.
It's very focused on data reporting. It is not telling anyone what they must do or where they must put their money. This was, again, when I now learned a whole lot about policy and how it comes to be, and you have to be very strategic there as well. And so this was a strategic first step to have the first regulation of its kind for venture capital to shine a light and bring transparency to an industry that has been incredibly opaque and secretive over the 80 years of its existence. So we can actually measure consistently. So funds who meet certain criteria will need to report for the previous year where their money was invested, broken out into demographics, so we can just know where is it going, both dollar-wise and percentage-wise. They're going to report to the state. The state will make it publicly available so that people can see. So if you're a founder and you're thinking about your fundraising plan and you're going to go pitch all these funds, the majority of whom are in California, you can go look it up on a public website and say, oh, you know what? I see that 0 of their dollars went to women founders last year. Probably not worth my time to go pitch them. I value my own time and pitch people who are actually writing checks to founders like me. And incredible. We can do consistent analysis. You know, if you want change, this is part of, Rob, where I said, you know, I have a private company solution myself to address part of this problem, but the funding gap is too big a problem for private industry to solve, or for any one company in a private industry to solve. That's where I said, policy has to be part of this too. We're not going to see change. We have to have regulatory behind it. We have to have nonprofit work behind it as well. It has to be a whole combination of things that is, you know, powers how our economy works to see an actual change. And data is a critical part of deciding what kind of programming is needed to actually affect this change, right? Like a whole lot of money, of grant money and public federal money, state money, a lot of it goes into accelerator programs and entrepreneurship hubs where we are teaching people how to be entrepreneurs. The explosion of that industry is unbelievable. And they finish and they're all trained up and they can't access the money they need.
Exactly.
So maybe we need to shift some programming or some funding to other vehicles to allow those entrepreneurs to actually innovate. But it's very hard to make that case if you don't have the data to show that it's needed. And so that's what
important.
SB54 does. It brings that data forward. It is collected in a consistent and repeatable way and publicly available.
That's incredible. I mean, it takes us away from that. Like, hey guys, we're not going to regulate you. So like, we just trust you to like report on yourselves, collect whatever and share whatever you like, publish it in your private forums. That'd be great. That's enough. We're good. Right. I mean, so like, like zero trust. I mean, like a default, like probably naive trust to say like, oh, we trust you to tell us what you're doing when you don't have to. But now like a legislative involvement, which of course those who would hate this kind of like would say like, this is regulatory capture. People are slowing innovation, which is nonsense, right? Daylight
there's
is
a lot of people who don't like me because of my involvement in it. Like,
of course,
not everyone's
of
a fan.
course.
Yeah.
No, of course. I mean, but it's also bullshit. Like, I mean, come on. Like, sunlight and daylight is literally the greatest cleanser and greatest amplifier of all things that are true and need to happen, right? And the stuff that happens in the dark is never the good stuff. My dad used to joke when I was a early teens, early 20s, and running around living my social life and at high speed in my early 20s, and he'd say, "Hey," he's like, "Let me remind you, nothing good happens after midnight." And like that was his overarching lesson for years. And then I would, smart ass that I was, and I'd push back on him. No. But I met this real cute girl at the closing at 2 a.m. and blah, blah, blah. And this would be like weeks later. And he'd be like, yeah. And how many dates did that last? Right. Like how long did that? Right. He's like, I'm telling you, nothing good happens essentially in the dark. Right. And so what we had was an industrial example of that in this, that you and your peers uncovered and then said, okay, wait a minute. Like, how can we use the tools that exist in our democratic system that we have to shine some light, which is regulation, right? Shine some light into this so that we're not asking you to do something that is like, we're going to force you to be less profitable. We're simply asking you to just publicly articulate specifically and be held accountable to the facts that you share.
Yeah.
So that we can help validate. And by the way, if you're good at it, like this should be another great opportunity for you to show off how good you are at what you're doing. And there shouldn't be an interest in hiding. So, all right, I'm curious. And this is a very much more kind of timely political commentary discussing this in August of 2025. I could argue, as I read through your research and I kind of prepared for this, I was like, oh God, like it went into effect in March of 2025. Like we literally just got this signed in the nick of time. Right. So I'm curious about that. Like, does SB 54 and its potential, not just in California, because it'll hold up in California, but like its usefulness as an example of what could be created legislatively in other states around the country. Does that hold up nowadays? Does it have legs more broadly as you try and advance this type of legislation, transparency legislation in other places in face of this just absurd authoritarian political federal takeover that we're living through right now?
Yeah, I mean it's a valid question.
It's a tough one.
So it is, but part of the strategy of doing state level policy versus federal policy is that it is state, right? It is a state law. It was signed into law, so there's no more arguing about that. It is. There is a little bit different in its timeline. Is entities have to register with the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation in California by March 1st, 2026. And the first data report will be April 1st, 2026, covering 2025 investments.
Makes
so
sense.
It is signed into law. The practical implication of things once they're signed into law takes some time. It's like government doesn't act super fast. I don't know if that's surprising to anybody here.
No, yeah.
The good news is it is state run. It is California state run. There's a reason for doing that.
Yeah.
And
so as it unfolds, as it gets applied and we start seeing these types of reporting, it feels like to me, the obvious answer in part to this question is like, well, there's 22 other states that we know we could probably run that to, and they'll be pretty receptive to the same concepts and ideas because the political belief systems are similar to that of California. But then there's maybe 26 other states that'll be like, no way, right? Like, so is that really what's going to happen?
Is fine because of the consolidation of capital and venture capital specifically. 3 states control 80+% of venture capital dollars. You don't need every single state to comply. If we have 2 states, I'm working on Massachusetts right now, been working on it with the team for years. If we get California, New York, and
Mass-
Massachusetts, we have
Boom.
a comprehensive data set. Even
That's
just
awesome.
California, that's 65% of the data, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
even just one state will have global and, quite frankly, international implications. And to your point, I have a whole network now internationally of people who are politically activated and connected who want this type of legislation enacted where they are. And every single new piece of legislation that adds to this data set will have compound impact.
No, that's terrific. And I can validate that for you on personal experience because I got a text this morning from our mutual friend, Megan Stevenson Krause at Diversity VC. And she is super excited that we were having this conversation today. She's like, I can't wait for the episode to come out. When's it going to come out? I was like, slow your roll, buddy.
You're a great partner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's just one of many of the people in common that we have that will enjoy this conversation. All right, let's break the pattern here a little bit. Talk to us about Scroobius. Like tell us what it is. Tell us, we've teased it, named a couple of times. Like tell us what it is. Tell us what it does. Tell us who it works for, right? Who it supports. And then if you want to throw in there, like what the hell Scroobius means as a name, like just for fun, you could do that too.
Awesome. I know. It's a funny name. No one can spell it, but you all remember it. And there's a story.
Right. So you can share that story if you like, but also tell us what it's all about. Tell us the business of Scroobius and why it exists.
So my big revelation when I did all of this research, and we've talked about all the negatives and the consolidation of venture and inequity of it all, right? All those things. The other side of that is what I call the rest of us. The rest of us who are not included in the homogeny of venture capital is most of the population, and combined, much more capital than what venture capital has to offer. But we are, by definition, a fragmented long tail. It's millions, not exaggerating, of individuals, both on the founder side, on the investor side. There is fluidity, right? I am both founder and investor. There are millions of us moving in and out of these spaces that don't have a way to efficiently connect with each other and build the relationships which lead to the learning, the growth, and the capital, right? That was my, right? What you asked is how did they raise when I couldn't raise? Because they could pick up a phone and just have the validity and the trust that was required without everything else. Well, the rest of us don't have that because systems have kept us marginalized and separated from each other until now. And so Scroobius is that digital platform that utilizes what I have expertise in and my team does in how do people actually make decisions about where they put their attention and time, and how do they form bonds that lead them wanting to create relationships that open doors, that open networks, that open wallets, all of those things. And so we're how we find each other. So Scroobius is, right, an AI capital access platform where we help both new and experienced founders, investors, and ecosystem partners find each other efficiently and build those relationships where they can together learn and grow and access capital. Because we have to stop trying to fix a system that is working the way it was designed to work. Venture capital is working the way it was designed to. We have to stop doing
very, very well, arguably, right? Like it's I've always made that same point, right? The emotional resistance or the intellectual or the industrial resistance to its change comes from the fact that it works. Like this isn't like to the people that are participating in it, limited partners, fund managers, entrepreneurs who benefit from it. Generally speaking, my words, not yours, like white dudes who look like me, but wear puffy jackets and khaki pants, right? Who came from 3 universities primarily. Like it's working so well for them that they look at some of you who come to them and say like, it's broken, it's not working, it's not serving us. Like you have like a third eye or something, right? They're like, what is wrong with you? It's working exactly as we designed it 80 years ago.
It is, but even even taking apart the demographics of it, because 80 years ago, yeah, it was white men in power. We're seeing that again, right? With what you pointed out is this regime takeover. It's white people who want to be in power, white men. There's some women bad actors too, but that's primarily what it is and how our economy was run back then as well. But even just the principle of venture capital, right? It came to be after World War II, when wealthy elite had this theory that these newer innovations coming out after World War II would have a better chance of succeeding with their money and with their help and resources. Those were both needed to reduce the risk that these new innovations would make it in the world and make everybody a bunch of money. And it did. And because of that risk reduction, they consistently look for signals or markers of new opportunities that match what worked for them before, which is how we get that homogenous cycle, because you inherently see people like yourself as less risky. And if you are homogenous in a group, you will always see that same demographic as less risky and you'll put your money behind them. So we're seeing that cycle. But what happened over these 80 years, especially in America, it's not the case in every other country, is this ideal of the unicorn, right? Of like, it's only a success if it's 100x, returns. That's success. Otherwise, it's not. Otherwise, it's a failure. But that is particular to venture capital, because as you pointed out, the business model of venture capital is to return profits to the limited partners. It is a business. And that is the fiduciary responsibility of a general partner, is to act in the best interest of their investors, not the startups.
You and I have bantered about this on social media previously, right? That is, my words. I always say, like, hey, founders, just remember, just like, we talk about the memes on social media that say, like, if the tool you use, if the platform you're on is free, like, you're the product. Like, hey, guess what, founders? Like, you're not the customer. Like, you're not too. I don't care how the VC writes it on their website or on their Instagram page. Like, I don't care how much they say they're founder friendly, like that. Like, I'm a lot of people friendly. I'm public friendly. But that doesn't mean I'm deeply invested in everybody's lives, right? Like, I mean, their client, their customer, they are, and they hate when I say this, I say it lovingly to all my venture capital friends, like, they are just modern day, very specific niche asset managers or money managers for institutions and very wealthy people. Like, that is literally their job. And that's how they make their money. So they're incentivized to do that job very well. The founder is literally the commodity that we chase to fill our funnels with, because if we don't have anybody in the funnel, we have no chips to play on our table. Like, I mean, it's just, but founders aren't told that often enough or ever.
They're not told it. But Rob, to me, that was part of the epiphany with Scroobius. And when you ask what does Scroobius do, it's okay, that's venture's business model. They have to act that way. Well, the rest of us, private wealth, don't. We're not businesses. And our motivation for acting most of the time actually isn't even financial return. That's a benefit if we get a financial return. But we are using our dollars to help the people and the innovations that we want to see in the world exist and be there. And that's not true for everyone, right? But that's the beauty of it, is everyone can do whatever they want. It's their own money and they don't report to anyone else. They don't have to give profits to anyone else. How do we activate that capital class to efficiently get that money to where it should be? And that is a platform solution. That is what we are building with Scroobius. And what is beautiful about it to me, and where, we have a moat and where we're developing, is you can't shift the capital until you create the relationships. It is human by definition. So the root of this and where we will succeed is in understanding how people relate to each other and how they build the type of genuine relationship that opens up that capital, both investor to founder, but also investor to investor. Angel groups are not an efficient way to meet like-minded investors. You don't know them yet because they're not in your geography or they're not in your current affiliation. It's all about connecting the right people at the right time and guiding them through having the right conversation so they build a bond and open up their networks and their resources and their capital.
I love that. And you've mentioned enhanced, strengthened by AI. You mentioned digital. So assuming, but talk to me, like does Scroobius serve its constituents, its communities everywhere? Is it just Massachusetts? Is it just California? Is it all across the United States? Is it useful and valuable, available internationally? Like give me some of the kind of the profile of the people that are involved.
Yeah, no, it's everywhere. We're international, but we're a 5-year-old company. It's a whole other podcast, the story of Scroobius, because I incorporate
and that literally is that's literally a different podcast. That's like a whole other, like, hey, tell me your successful founder story. This podcast is the one I do, is more like, hey, let me crack your brain and tell us how we can think differently about the world that we're building.
Yeah, exactly. But so anyway, the first 2 years of building this company was just me. During COVID, with 2 kids, and all of a sudden I had to homeschool, and I am not meant to be a teacher of little children. That is not my calling. But in the 3 years that we've had our custom software out there, we have had over 1,000 founders come through and be members of the platform. We have hundreds of investors. We have newsletter that goes out to 5,000 people. I've got a huge following socially, and so does our company. Organically, really, because we're building something that resonates, that people want. And yeah, it's a digital platform. It's fully scalable. It's asynchronous all around. And we are providing people with access to all the things we're talking about right now, to education, to guidance in how you communicate with people that you're uncomfortable around because you haven't had a network that's allowed you to be around them before. It's not your fault, right? I like to be, we take the scary away. That's part of our brand. That's what I put into it. It's just personable and powered by tools that we have available today that we didn't before, right? The generative AI capabilities, and now we're looking into agentic AI to be able to really help people in a human forward way be able to relate to each other and have that guidance real time that wasn't even an option, a year ago. And so when we talk about AI powered, it's both curating based on algorithms that take into account how you might be likely to relate to someone else, right? Like the qualities of you, Rob, and me, Allison, we are a good match, like energy wise, the way we communicate. That's cool. Part of how we identify, will you get along with this person? As well as your affiliations, what your business does, what you're looking for, do you invest, all those kind of other elements as well. But without the human, you're not going to form a relationship. You're going to have a transaction, and then they don't happen without the relationship.
That's amazing. That's really cool. I gotta ask before we finish talking about Scroobius, what is Scroobius name? Like, what does that name mean? How do we? I have to keep practicing how to spell it correct. Honestly, and I'm not gonna lie. One of the reasons it sticks in my brain is I'm about to date myself here, right? Is like, I see it and I immediately think like she runs the Scooby-Doo company. Right? Like,
I've heard that before.
I'll never forget it. So this is awesome. But like, what does Scroobius, literally the word, mean?
Yes. So it is from a poem. There's a 19th century poet, Edward Lear, who wrote a poem called the Scroobius Pip. So that's where Scroobius is from. It's also why our flagship educational program is called the Pitch It Plan. So it's PIP for short. But essentially, he wrote children's poetry. A lot of people know me with great notoriety overseas during his time. But this is a children's poem, and it's all about this creature that shows up in the animal kingdom called the Scroobius Pip. And it looks like it is a little bit of every single type of animal. And the whole poem are the animals in their groups around the Scroobius Pip, trying to figure out, who are you? Where do you belong? Which of us are you part of? And at the end, they celebrate it because it is totally unique. It can't be classified, and it's happy. And so for me, I work, primarily to help elevate those who don't fall into traditional classifications as it pertains to the startup ecosystem. And we shouldn't be penalized for that. We should be celebrated because uniqueness is where you find alpha and where you find profit. And that is why it is Scroobius.
Freaking love that. And also, and you are unique. You are difficult. It's difficult to classify you, and you are joyful, right? So that is perfect alignment between brand, purpose, leadership, and it creates just what you just did, which is an amazing story. which makes it
Me
all
too.
which makes it all memorable. That's terrific. All right, I just a couple questions before we finish up. I'll be respectful of
Sure.
your time. It's a busy day here for all of us. So I'm curious. I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about this. This is a little kind of wider afield, but if I didn't grab you while I have you and ask you for some thoughts and input on this next kind of big question of what's going on in the markets today, I would be a fool, right? So I am curious if we could just talk about kind of broader private capital markets overall recently, like in this last couple of years, right? I feel like my interpretation of it was like, 2021, we had like this absurd peak bubble that reminded me, because I'm old enough to have both been just alive and also raised capital and been an entrepreneur back in internet 1.0, the actual, when all this was born, right? And it was a peak bubble then, like, holy crap. Like, and then I felt it again in 2021, but since then, right? And for a number of factors that have nothing to do with business, but since then we've experienced kind of a dramatic reset, right? In my opinion, right? And so a lot of it is just heightened uncertainty, contraction in the industry, less active limited partner institutions investing, and it's led to what I see when I talk to a lot of our mutual friends, many of whom are, as you would say, marginalized first time or early days fund managers, right? Or former entrepreneurs or from former executives who moved into venture capital to try and attack these problems by literally being less marginalized distributors of capital to marginalized people, right? Like basically taking the torch up themselves and going like, all right, this is what I couldn't get. I'm going to go fight for you. And I'm going to launch a fund to do it, right? We're going to create more women of color, more people of color fund managers as an antidote to the virus that was coming at us. Yes, that virus reference was intentional right there. Right? Like, and yet now I hear these people are like contracting, struggling, closing. I mean, because it's just the support's not there. So I'm curious, like, it seems like, question here, like, we've warped ourselves into some weird other time space where now all we're going to have is like these supersized halves, the A16Zs of the world, becoming essentially private equity firms, like in my old assessment of what that was, right? With consulting firms that are bolted onto them, and they're essentially just investing in everything. They're like, oh, we'll buy your secondary shares. We'll invest in late stage companies. Like, oh, we'll buy assets from companies that already exist after they went public. I'm like, you're just a PE firm then. You're just Carlyle. You're not a venture capital firm anymore. And you also has nothing to do that's serving founders and innovation and entrepreneurship, right? So we've got that. And then we seem to have like this, like, super tiny seed stage, I was able to squeeze out $5 million or $10 million or $5 million, like, to try and change the narrative. And I just feel like this can't be good for entrepreneurs. Like at the widest definition of what you and I think entrepreneurs are. So I'm curious, like, how do you see all this that has been happening and where you think it's going?
I love that you ask me really softball questions.
I'm trying to do my job here.
No, it is. I mean, it's something I think about a lot, obviously, but you're right? There's a huge consolidation and bifurcation within the venture capital industry, and it is morphing into private equity, which is a different model because it's not sustaining itself by the venture capital model. Right? If we look at 2024 data, all of last year, the majority of all the money went to 9 venture capital funds. So it is hugely consolidated. And venture capital is premised on a power law dynamic, which says you have to invest in a whole bunch of things because only a couple of them are going to hit it big, and they're going to hit it really big. So you have to find those outliers. But when you have such consolidation of capital with such a homogenous group that is only allocating to a homogenous group, you're preventing your power law dynamic from working. And we're seeing that with the illiquidity that's happening because exits aren't happening. And so much money is being invested in the mega funds. That's what's dominating the venture investing space right now, that it's like impossible to generate the returns that would be required for the amount of investment that's happening. So we're seeing venture try to figure out what is it now because it's not working anymore.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where it is inevitable that the rest of us come into play and that we readjust what we consider a successful entrepreneur to be and the financial vehicles we use so that we adjust how much and under what structure is capital required to generate a return that will be wealth generating for everyone involved, because it does not need to be at a mega scale. And if we stop thinking so individualistic that one company must be this huge exit and everyone's going to benefit and the whole world's going to use this product, if we stop thinking about it that way and think about a landscape of entrepreneurship that is sustainable and makes people happy and creates societal gain with smaller, maybe not even investments. There are new financial vehicles being introduced all of the time. Like, you can make one up, right? Revenue-based financing is new. Equity crowdfunding is new. You can create things still. It's not a set system. But if you think about it in that broader way, where the sum of the smaller parts creates greater wealth, creates $4 trillion of GDP, and creates sustainable, happy lifestyles without the extreme burnout of trying to be the one that makes it big. That is my view of how we address the state of innovation and entrepreneurship today.
That, my friend, is why you get asked the hard questions, because you are able to parse through them and help us think through what was literally like a 4-layered nuanced cake of a question, right? To help us like understand that it does tie back to just, again, human experience. I'll broaden it out and say, like, again, just good business / good economic development strategy on whether that be on a local community basis or scale it up on a regional, state, national, global basis. Like, I said this to a friend, totally unrelated to this conversation, this topic. I was talking to somebody early this morning, and it popped up something about commercial real estate. And it was a story about a particular property here in Los Angeles that is like a 100,000 square foot old Macy's department store. Right. And it's going to be closed because Macy's is like, I can't even remember. I didn't even know Macy's was still a thing. Right. So apparently it has been. Now it's not going to be anymore. And they're repurposing it to turn it into X, Y, and Z, et cetera, et cetera. And his response to me was like, oh, yeah, I mean, well, that's good. That's great. He lives near there. That's why we were talking about it. He's like, but I mean, boy, I wish it would work as an example to so many other commercial properties that I see that are basically just sitting empty. Right. And that's not a Los Angeles specific problem nowadays, right? That repeats itself at some size difference around every city or every locality in the country. And my response was much to what you just said. I think, like, we've so financialized American culture and American capitalism that literally now commercial landlord, like in the olden days, right? Not my olden days, but like 100 years ago, like a commercial property owner, someone would build a building because they wanted to build a building in their town, in their city, right? Or their town. So it doesn't have to be just big cities, but in their town. They built a building because then they wanted to invite local business people to take up housing in that building to build their businesses, because then that would be a pillar of the community. And then that person who built that building would build another building that would help other businesses thrive and find a home. And those businesses would employ people in that community. And then that building owner, who was a pillar of the community now because of that, then would like extrapolate that into his own or her own leadership, his own almost always the time 100 years ago, like leadership, and then became like the guy in the city. Like, it's right. And it's like the worst case example of this is like Potter in It's a Wonderful Life, right? Again, like he like, but that would, like, you didn't buy something to then let it sit fallow, right? Like, that would literally be like buying a farm to just not plant any crops, but lease it out or wait for the value of the land to go up to such a degree that then you could sell it. And then your financialization, like your gain, like you won, you're a great entrepreneur because you had the asset value of, like, or buying a house and leaving it empty. And I'm going way afield here, but like in some ways, what you just said is like, so what I heard in your answer is like part of the alt path here, Rob, the alt reality is not just a like, yes, Rob, yes, there are only 4 or 5 venture capital firms, and they're not really venture capital firms anymore. They're private equity firms. even though they don't say they are. And that's bad for founders, because now founders trying to find funding from venture capital firms, it's you might as well just be applying for a job at Google, because you're going to be number 1,227 on the list of leads in their digital sorting AI tool that's going to decide if you're a good founder or not a good founder. So you're never going to build a human relationship ever.
Yep.
Unless you're just wildly lucky, which just go buy a lottery ticket. Right. And so what you're saying is like, hey, Rob, maybe the better, best version of capitalism is rooted in humankind and in real relationships and in those people then helping each other and helping fund those that have access to capital and availability of resources, help fund the people that don't have access to that in your communities to build businesses, to grow an economy. And then everybody benefits from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I asked you that question.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Shore Capital. In today's venture capital world, it's not just about cash. It's about relationships. Capital is harder to find. Limited investors have fewer managers that they can trust. And the industry is just filled with far too much hype. Shore Capital is an early-stage venture fund investing in the world's most ruthlessly iterative founders, helping its limited partners to find founders who are solving the world's most dynamic problems, teams that excel in mastering the idea maze, teams moving with a rapid, iterative velocity and demonstrating radical resourcefulness. Shore Capital doesn't just write checks, though. They become fractional co-founders when needed, offering strategic support, high-leverage relationship development, and a deep commitment to the long-term success of their portfolio companies. If you are a ruthlessly iterative founder with a bold vision or a limited investor seeking sustained access to the brightest big thinkers of our time, Shore Capital wants to meet you. So visit shorecapital.notion.site to learn more.
But you're right. And sometimes, it can sound a little, like, well, what are you talking about? I'll go live in a commune or something. But really it is. We've let this definition of what is a successful entrepreneur be defined by venture capital standards. And we're forgetting about just the human condition and satisfaction, and that moderate wealth creation is still very lucrative and happy existence. You don't have to have this view of winner take all of the time. That is how we end up in a place where we are. Again, I just see it as inevitable that the rest of us get involved in private investing because we have entirely different motivations and expectations for doing it. And if we have the digital tools to connect our web in a broader sense, more efficiently and effectively, we can pool our smaller capital into the same size checks that these mega rounds are getting. But it's a Herculean task because of how distributed we are and how different we are. But that's where others are building, and it's just the inevitability of it.
Beautiful. It's a cultural and industrial reset, right? And I mean, more dramatically, I could say revolution, but it's a cultural and industrial reset, right? From a practical, tactical standpoint, like revolution. Okay, that
new. Yeah. Like, it's also not new, right? We have seen this. The corollary is online dating. It has already worked with the same principle of millions of individuals who need a better way to find each other and to build a relationship that leads to a life partner, right? Because that's essentially what we're talking about. When you meet someone in business who believes in you, they become somewhat of a life partner.
Absolutely.
You go in and out of jobs. You're a founder. You're an investor. You support each other. That's what, these so-called mafias that come out of big successful companies are. They're business life partners.
Yep.
We have seen this work with romantic life partners. It used to be the same. You would find your person in your, place of worship, in your school, in your work, in your community. And it was so inefficient because your person isn't there. And then online dating happened, and it is the number one way very quickly in the scale of time became the number one way that you met your significant other. And you often were not geographically close to each other, and you made it work. This is very, very similar. So while it's Herculean, it's not new. It's just a different context.
And the optimist, pragmatic optimist in us today can say like, and it can happen quickly. All right, last question, so we can get you on your way. This has been incredible. I've enjoyed every aspect of this. I've learned a ton. You've satiated my curiosity on so many things. I'm so grateful for this. Last question, and this is a bit more tactical, kind of actionable, and I think it dovetails right off of what we were just talking about for those entrepreneurs, for those founders, right? So for the entrepreneur or the founder in any local community, anywhere that's listening to this or watching us, right, who needs outside capital, we're just going to call it that. They just need some outside money that they don't have their own. Like, what are 2 or 3 things in any way you want to shrink this down to a couple bullet points, like that they should do or that they should pursue in their own community to kind of get them on the right path? One, obviously, I'm just going to put it out there, sign up for Scroobius, get involved in the Scroobius world. Like, I'll do the selfless commercial here for you. But like beyond that, what else are the 1 or 2 things that they should do after or differently than signing up for Scroobius?
Yes, absolutely. Love the sign up for Scroobius. Come find us. But yeah, so I get this question a lot. And the first one is a little less actionable per se. But the first thing I always tell founders is evaluate why you think you need money. What is it for? Where does it get you? Because we have been conditioned by the popular press to think we have to go get investment money. But the money is just a conduit to building a successful business. And there are other ways to think about it besides I got to go find investors. There's other places to get capital. Nothing is easy. It can seem easier to go find an investor than to get a loan from a bank or consider other creative sources of funding. It's not. None of them are easy. So the first thing is really evaluate, how does this money help you build a successful business sustainably? First thing. A lot of founders will realize going out for those investors actually is counterintuitive to how I want to build my business. And the second, if you do decide, yep, no, I need capital, I want it to be investment capital, there are many different types of equity investors. Venture is just one. We've already talked about, I'm very bullish on angel investors, but the crux of it is identify, just like you make your ideal customer profile, right? Most entrepreneurs should know an ICP, your ideal customer profile. You also have an ideal investor profile. Build it first. Who would you talk to and describe what you're doing, whose eyes would get big and they would just get it? What are they like? How old are they? Where do they live? What career have they had? What passions do they have? Well, do they have kids? What do they talk about? Build your profile. And then you can go find that kind of person, because who you talk to about your idea, forget about pitching, just go talk to people about it and genuinely want their feedback and guidance because they're in a position to give you good feedback and guidance. You'll start building those relationships that easily turn into the money that you need. But if you go out there and you think, I need a list of investors, how do I find that list of investors? And I'm going to go I need to email 500 people to get to, and you start going down that path, you're not going to get it.
Nope.
Any investor, those lists out there, those are not the people for you. And again, there's no shortcut. If you try to make it a transaction and you go out there and you're going numbers game and you're not personalizing anything, it's not going to be worth your time. It is worth your time to find your people. And you will surprise yourself with how you're able to access things you couldn't.
Terrific advice. I love that the conversation started with the overt data nerd, systems thinker person, by the way, which when I say data nerd, I think that's an ultimate compliment because I'm a closeted data person who everybody just mistakenly likes to assign over the years that like, he's just the guy that like talks really loud and waves his arms around all the time. Like he doesn't know anything about data or tactics. I'm like, no. I just don't talk about that as openly. But I love that we went from that. And then you punchline just now to me, just encapsulates the entire conversation, which is it really does all ultimately flow through and or come back to the human relationships that you build. Like how you understand your own story, how you understand your place in the world, the market, the arena that you're playing in, how you understand the rules of those games that you're playing in or don't, and then need to try and understand. But it really all does come back to people. And if Scroobius is a mechanism through which, a platform through which people can find one another in a way to essentially ease or mitigate some of the risks or ease that journey, which is, again, not easy, but make it a little easier. That's freaking awesome. And I'm grateful that you are building it, and I'm glad that it's in the world. And I'm grateful for you coming to spend some time with me today. No one will know that we had to abort this conversation a week ago because we had some technical difficulties, but super excited to get it done today. How can people find you, follow you if you'd like that? You said you have great following, both you and the company. How can people find the company or sign up for it? So what's the socials or the email or the website address, et cetera?
Yeah, I love it. So definitely go to our website, Scroobius. It's a funny name. It's Scroobious, like delicious, Scroobius. Even if you spell it wrong, you'll still get there because there's not any companies named Scroobius. Find me on LinkedIn, Allison Byers. That's my primary social platform. I'm very active on there. Sign up for our newsletter. You can do that right under my profile, my name in LinkedIn. I have a link there, and it's obviously on our website. We send a newsletter to about 5,000 people right now, once a month from me personally. It's really good. It's a great way to stay on top of all the things we're doing. That's how I would recommend finding us. I'm also writing a book. It's called Fundraising for the Rest of Us. Right now, all the things we just talked about. It's in that book, but I'm doing a beta reader program right now. So if people apply to that, they get early access to all the content in the book in exchange for giving me your feedback. So I make sure I can include it and write the thing that will be most helpful for the people reading it. So that's another way.
I gotta hang up from this and rush and sign up for that list. That is amazing. And again, thank you. So gracious with your time. So generous with your knowledge and your experience. And frankly, I'll say this, my words again, just inspiring to the rest of us to realize that we hold so much more power and agency, as you said, than we think we do. And if that's not some pragmatic optimism to end this conversation on, I don't know what is. So that's incredible. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Rob. And this is a testament to the human relationship. I think we met on Twitter when it was actual Twitter. I'm not there anymore, but when we were.
Neither am I.
Years ago, right? This was a years-long relationship development to get to this incredible conversation where we're helping
100%.
each other with our platforms.
100% true. So grateful for it. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.